All right, let's dive into the mystery surrounding Mothman.
Yeah, that creature with glowing red eyes you might have seen online.
Exactly the one.
Ah.
We've got a lot of fascinating sources for this, deep dive articles, Wikipedia, and even a YouTube discussion with some paranormal researchers.
Wow.
We're going to trace how Mothman went from just a local West Virginia legend to a global phenomenon.
Right.
But more importantly, we'll be digging into the cultural and psychological reasons behind its popularity. What is it about this creature that keeps us coming back for more?
Yeah, one of our sources uses this term genre shift to describe how the Mothman story has evolved over time.
Okay, so let's rewind back to the very beginning, Point Pleasant, West Virginia, 1966.
Oh, okay.
Can you set the scene for us?
So imagine a small town on the Ohio River. Life was pretty ordinary until suddenly a mysterious creature was spotted.
Oh.
Sightings described a large man-sized gray or black bird with these striking glowing red eyes.
Wow.
And the creature was often seen around a former World War II munitions plant, which locals called the TNT area.
So not your average bird-watching experience?
No, not at all.
Did people just brush it off, or did these sightings cause a stir?
Oh, it definitely caused a stir. The sightings generated a wave of fear and excitement in Point Pleasant.
Wow.
And it wasn't just a few isolated incidents either. The situation escalated to the point where the police were called in.
Really?
And even the National Guard had to intervene to manage the crowds flocking to the area, hoping for a glimpse of the creature.
Wow, that's intense. So what did researchers make of these initial sightings? Were people actually seeing something unusual?
So some researchers looking back believe that the initial sightings could have been misidentified sandhill cranes or herons.
Okay.
These are large birds, and those glowing eyes might be a phenomenon called eye shine. Basically, the reflection of light from the bird's eyes amplified at night.
So a case of mistaken identity, maybe.
Oh.
But there's something else connected to Mothman, right?
Right.
Something that made the legend even more chilling.
Right. In December 1967, the Silver Bridge collapsed, a tragic event that claimed the lives of 46 people. And some people believe that Mothman was a harbinger of this disaster, a sinister omen.
That's a pretty eerie connection. Did people actually see Mothman at the bridge before the collapse?
Well, while there's no concrete evidence linking Mothman directly to the bridge collapse, the timing of the sightings and the tragedy fueled that perception.
Right.
It definitely added a layer of fear and mystery to the Mothman legend.
Yeah, it's understandable how a tragedy like that would deeply impact a community and become intertwined with a local legend. But the story didn't end there, right?
No, not at all.
Mothman didn't just fade away after the bridge collapse?
Absolutely not. In fact, he's had a resurgence in recent years, particularly with the 2017 Chicago sightings.
Hold on, Chicago Mothman.
Yeah.
This is where it gets really interesting. Tell me more about these Chicago sightings. Were they similar to what people reported in Point Pleasant?
The descriptions from Chicago are similar to the Point Pleasant accounts, describing a tall winged creature with glowing red eyes. But unlike the Point Pleasant sightings, the Chicago reports were primarily concentrated in the suburbs and around Lake Michigan.
Interesting.
And most importantly, there wasn't a clear connection to a major disaster this time.
So no bridge collapse, no major catastrophe in Chicago.
That's fascinating. Do we know who was investigating these Chicago sightings?
We have sources mentioning key figures like Lon Strickler, Tobias Wayland, and Emily Wayland. They were actively investigating the Chicago phenomenon.
It sounds like they were taking a serious look into these sightings. Did they conclude that Mothman was real?
Well, their approach was a mix of open-mindedness and cautious skepticism.
Okay.
They focused on documenting witness testimonies and exploring various possibilities.
Okay, so they weren't rushing to judgment, but they were keeping an open mind. But surely not everyone was convinced, right?
Right.
There had to be some skeptics in the mix.
Of course, in one of our YouTube sources, a researcher named Jack expressed skepticism about the Chicago sightings.
Okay. He suggested the possibility of hoaxes, misidentifications, even drones being mistaken for Mothman. He also pointed to the lack of photographic evidence, which is a common challenge in cryptid investigations.
That's a valid point. If people are seeing this creature so frequently, why hasn't anyone captured a clear photo of it?
It's a question that both believers and skeptics have to address.
Right.
The believers often say the creature is somehow elusive, perhaps even supernatural,
Right.
which makes it difficult to photograph. But skeptics argue that most sightings occur quickly, often at night when people are startled.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
If you come face to face with something that terrifies you, your fight or flight response kicks in, and taking a picture is probably the last thing on your mind.
Exactly. And then there's the possibility of some sightings being deliberate hoaxes fabricated for attention.
Right. That's always a factor to consider, especially in the age of social media.
Yeah, it is, but it's important to remember that not every witness is a hoaxer.
Right.
Many are genuinely trying to understand a strange and unsettling experience.
So if those original Point Pleasant sightings were potentially just misidentified birds, and the Chicago sightings lack a clear disaster connection, why do people keep seeing this creature? What is it about Mothman that makes him so enduring?
That's a great question. I think it points to a deeper connection to our cultural and psychological relationship with the unknown.
Okay, I'm all ears.
Yeah.
Tell me more about this cultural and psychological connection.
One of our sources is an English professor named Rosemary Hathaway.
Okay.
She suggests that cryptids like Mothman can represent a way for small towns to reclaim their identity.
Now that's interesting. How would that work in practice?
Well, she argues that in places like West Virginia, which often face stereotypes tied to their industries,
Right.
cryptids offer a new narrative. They can attract tourism and provide a unique identity that goes beyond those stereotypes. Think of it like a cryptid tourism boom.
A cryptid tourism boom. I never thought of it that way. But it makes sense. It's about creating something unique, something that sets a place apart. Is it all about economics, though? Or is there a deeper psychological appeal to creatures like Mothman?
Oh, there's definitely more to it than economics. We have another source, Kim Stryker, a folklore professor.
Okay.
She argues that interest in cryptids tends to increase during times of societal upheaval.
That makes sense. When the world feels uncertain and scary, people search for explanations for stories that offer a sense of control,
Right.
even if those stories are about mysterious winged creatures.
Exactly. Stryker suggests these stories can act as a distraction, a way to inoculate ourselves against the fear of the unknown.
Right.
They provide a safe way to confront our anxieties about the world around us.
So it's like a collective coping mechanism, a way to process our fears and anxieties. But what about the people who are actively seeking out these stories?
Right.
Those who are drawn to the creepy and mysterious aspects of the unknown.
Stryker refers to this as dark tourism.
Okay.
The idea that people are drawn to places associated with paranormal events or true crime, it's about confronting fears head-on and exploring the darker side of human experience.
And Mothman fits right into that, doesn't he?
He does.
He's become a symbol of the mysterious and the unknown. What fascinates me is that even without concrete proof, these stories have so much power.
What's fascinating is that these stories aren't just entertainment. They reflect cultural anxieties, our need to make sense of the world, even the parts that defy explanation.
So what does this all mean? If Mothman is a product of folklore and human psychology, why do sightings persist even today? What does that say about our need for mystery and the unknown?
That's a really important question. It makes us think about whether Mothman is just a figment of our collective imagination, or perhaps something more. Maybe he tapped into a deeper reality that we're only beginning to understand.
That is the ultimate question, isn't it? Do we choose to believe in the possibility of the impossible, or do we dismiss it all as superstition?
Perhaps the most important takeaway is that the answer isn't always black and white.
Right.
Maybe there's a middle ground where we acknowledge the power of these stories, their cultural and psychological significance, without needing to accept them as literal truth.
I like that idea. A space where we can embrace the mystery and the thrill of the unknown without losing our sense of wonder and critical thinking.
Indeed.
It's amazing how this creature, born from a handful of sightings in a small town, has captured the imaginations of people all over the world. It makes you wonder what it is about this story that resonates with so many.
It really does. We've talked about the history and the cultural and psychological factors that fuel the legend, but now I think it's time to look closer at the people who are actively investigating these sightings.
That sounds like a great direction to go in. Do we know what kinds of approaches these investigators are taking? Are they using new methods, or are they following in the footsteps of earlier researchers?
Our sources mention a range of investigators, from experienced paranormal researchers to those who approach it with more skepticism.
Okay.
Each brings their own perspective and theories about what might be happening.
So a real mix of approaches. Let's start with the Chicago Mothman Task Force. I read that this group was formed specifically to investigate the wave of sightings around Chicago in 2017.
That's right. The Chicago Mothman Task Force included Lon Strickler, who runs a website called Phantoms and Monsters, and Tobias and Emily Whalen, who run the Singular Fortune Society.
So these are people who are actively collecting reports, visiting sighting locations, really trying to make sense of the phenomenon. It's great that there are dedicated researchers looking into this.
They seem to approach their investigations with both open-mindedness and a healthy dose of skepticism.
Okay.
They're not jumping to conclusions, but they're also not dismissing the experiences of those who believe they've encountered the creature.
It's refreshing to hear about investigators taking a balanced approach, considering different perspectives.
Yeah.
It's not just about proving or disproving Mothman's existence, is it?
Not at all. They're also interested in understanding the cultural and psychological context surrounding these sightings.
Right.
It aligns with what we discussed earlier about the importance of these stories, regardless of whether they are literally true or not.
Absolutely. It's about looking beyond the surface and understanding the deeper meanings behind these stories. One term that keeps popping up in our sources is high strangeness.
Yeah.
Could you remind me where we encountered that term?
You're right. High strangeness is an intriguing concept. It was coined by John Keel, the journalist who investigated the Point Pleasant sightings back in the 1960s.
Right, John Keel. He seemed to believe that there was more to Mothman than just a creature. What exactly did he think was going on?
Keel believed that Mothman wasn't simply a cryptid, but potentially a manifestation of something far stranger and difficult to categorize.
So was he thinking about things like interdimensional beings or extraterrestrials?
Those were some of his theories? Yes. He believed that Mothman sightings were often accompanied by other unusual events, things like UFO sightings. Strange phone calls and even encounters with mysterious individuals, sometimes referred to as men in black.
That's getting into some pretty wild territory. What kind of evidence did Keel have to support these ideas?
Keel proposed the concept of a superspectrum.
Okay.
The idea that there are wavelengths of energy we can't perceive with our normal senses.
Right.
He thought Mothman might be a creature that exists within those wavelengths, only occasionally crossing over into our reality.
So you're saying he thought Mothman might be some sort of interdimensional traveler?
Yeah.
Are all of the Chicago Mothman investigators convinced by this idea of high strangeness?
Not all of them, no. It's a pretty out there concept.
It makes sense. It seems like you'd need some pretty compelling evidence to back that up. Are there any investigators who are approaching the Chicago Mothman from a more grounded perspective?
Yes, there are. We have information about a researcher named Sam Moranto.
Okay.
He heads up the Illinois branch of the Mutual UFO Network, or MUFON, as it's more commonly known. He's been investigating UFO sightings for years and was one of the first people to receive reports of the Chicago Mothman.
So he's a credible source with a lot of experience in this field. What's his take on the Chicago Mothman sightings? Does he think there's something genuinely unexplained happening?
While he's open to the possibility of unusual phenomena, he emphasizes the importance of using scientific methods and critical thinking to evaluate the evidence before jumping to any conclusions.
Okay.
He believes many of the sightings can be explained as misidentifications of known animals like owls or herons.
Okay.
He also points out the lack of photographic evidence, which is a common challenge in cryptid investigations.
It does seem strange that with so many sightings, no one has managed to get a clear photo of Mothman. Do the believers have any explanations for that?
The believers often suggest that the creature is elusive,
Right.
possibly even supernatural,
Right.
making it difficult to capture on film. It's almost like they are saying it can shift in and out of our reality.
So they're leaning into the mystery, the idea that Mothman is somehow beyond our understanding. What about the skeptics? How do they explain the lack of photographic evidence?
Skeptics emphasize the fact that most sightings happen very quickly, often at night,
Right.
when people are more likely to be startled and not thinking about taking a picture.
That's true.
Huh.
I know if I encountered something strange and potentially scary, my first instinct wouldn't be to grab my phone and start filming.
Exactly. And then, of course, there's always the possibility of hoaxes. Some people might fabricate sightings for attention or notoriety.
Right, with the internet and social media, it's easy for misinformation and hoaxes to spread quickly.
It's important to be aware of that, but also to remember that not every witness is a hoaxer.
Right.
Many are genuinely trying to understand what they experience.
So we have this web of possibilities, misidentifications, hoaxes, genuine encounters with something unknown.
Right.
And it all circles back to that big question, is Mothman real?
I think the more important question is, does it even matter if Mothman is real? If we think back to what Dr. Allison said about genre shift,
Right.
the Mothman narrative has evolved beyond those initial sightings in Point Pleasant.
You're right, it has spread far beyond its origins.
Yeah.
Remind me, what did Dr. Allison mean by genre shift?
She argued that as the Mothman story has traveled beyond Point Pleasant,
Right.
it's become less tied to specific locations and disasters. It's evolved into a broader archetype, a symbol of our anxieties about the unknown.
So whether the creature itself is real or not, the stories, the feelings it evokes, those are real, and those have a significant impact on our culture and how we perceive the world around us.
Exactly. These stories act as a mirror reflecting our fears and fascinations, forcing us to confront the limits of our knowledge and what we believe is possible.
In that sense, the question of whether Mothman literally exists is almost secondary. The real value is in the conversation it sparks and the way it challenges us to think critically and explore the world with a sense of wonder and curiosity.
I think that's a great insight. It's not just about finding answers, it's about asking the right questions.
It's been a fascinating journey. So far, we started with those strange sightings in a small West Virginia town, and now Mothman is a global icon of the unexplained.
Right, and now it's time to delve into the heart of the mystery. We're going to explore some of the more intriguing theories about what Mothman is and where it might come from.
Oh, let's hear. What are we talking about here, aliens? Interdimensional beings. Give me the rundown.
Okay, well, our sources cover a range of theories. One of the most popular, especially among those who believe in high strangeness, is that Mothman is an interdimensional being.
Interdimensional. So the idea is that Mothman is somehow slipping in and out of our reality.
Precisely. People who support this theory often point to the creature's elusiveness, that ability to appear and vanish seemingly at will. They argue it suggests that Mothman isn't bound by the same laws of physics as we are.
I remember John Keel, the journalist who investigated those Point Pleasant sightings, had some pretty far-out ideas about Mothman's connection to UFOs and other paranormal phenomena. Didn't he think Mothman was some sort of interdimensional being, too?
He did. Keel even proposed a concept called the superspectrum, suggesting that there are wavelengths of energy beyond what we can perceive.
Right.
And he thought Mothman might exist within those wavelengths, only occasionally crossing over into our reality.
That's a pretty mind-bending concept. Is there anything in Keel's research that supports this idea of a superspectrum, or is it purely theoretical?
A lot of his work was based on interpretations of patterns in the reports that he collected. But even if we entertain the idea for a moment, it does make you wonder what would trigger these interdimensional crossings.
Some people believe that these crossings might be linked to events like natural disasters or even just heightened human emotions.
That's an interesting connection. It ties back into that idea of Mothman as a harbinger of doom. If it's sensitive to these shifts in energy, maybe its appearance is a warning sign.
I can see how that would add to the mystery and the fear surrounding Mothman. But not everyone buys into the interdimensional being theory, right?
Yeah.
What are some of the more down-to-earth explanations?
Of course, some people believe that Mothman is a misidentified animal, maybe a rare species of owl or a large bat.
Didn't one of our YouTube sources suggest that people might be mistaking sandhill cranes for Mothman? I think I read that somewhere those birds have reddish markings around their eyes.
Yes, and some researchers think those glowing eyes that so many people report could just be eye shine, which is just the reflection of light from an animal's eyes, and it can appear much brighter at night.
So maybe it's a case of people seeing something ordinary, but their fear and the darkness are just distorting their perception?
That's possible, but then how do you explain those consistent details in the descriptions, like the large size, the wings, the humanoid features? Those go beyond just a simple case of mistaken identity.
That's a good point. It seems like there's more to it than just a big bird.
What about the idea that Mothman is the result of a government experiment gone wrong? I've seen that theory floating around online.
Yes, the classic government conspiracy theory. It's popular among people who believe the government is hiding secrets about aliens and advanced technology.
Yeah, I get why people would think that, especially since those initial Mothman sightings were near a former munitions plant. Could have been some kind of chemical spill or radiation leak that mutated an animal into something monstrous. Some speculate about secret experiments involving genetic manipulation or even attempts to open portals to other dimensions.
It sounds like something out of a science fiction movie. But is there any actual evidence to back up these claims?
Our sources don't mention any concrete evidence to support those theories.
So it's more speculation than anything else, but I guess that's the nature of conspiracy theories. They often thrive in the absence of concrete proof.
Exactly. The lack of evidence is sometimes seen as evidence itself. It feeds into the belief that there's a cover-up, that something is being hidden.
Okay, so we've got interdimensional beings, misidentified animals, government conspiracies, Any other theories we should consider?
One of our sources mentions a really intriguing concept, the idea of a tulpa.
A tulpa. I'm not familiar with that term. Can you explain what a tulpa is?
It's a concept from Tibetan Buddhism, essentially. It's a thought form, an entity created through concentrated mental energy.
So are you saying that if enough people believe in Mothman, if they focus their collective energy on it, it could actually manifest in reality?
That's the basic idea. It suggests that our beliefs and thoughts have a tangible impact on the world around us.
Wow, that's a powerful concept. It connects to what we've been talking about, the power of stories to shape our understanding of the world. And if stories can influence how we perceive reality, maybe they can also shape reality itself.
It's a fascinating possibility, and it raises all sorts of questions about the nature of reality and the relationship between mind and matter.
This deep dive has taken us down some unexpected paths. We started with a cryptid story and ended up exploring human psychology, cultural anxieties, and the very nature of reality.
That's what makes a deep dive so rewarding. It's about making connections between seemingly unrelated ideas and seeing how they contribute to a bigger picture.
So where do we go from here? We've examined the theories, we considered the evidence, but the mystery of Mothman remains unsolved.
And maybe that's how it should be. The mystery, the unknown, is what keeps us coming back to these stories, what sparks our imagination and our desire to explore.
I think you're right. Whether it's a real creature, an interdimensional being, or a product of our collective imagination, has become a symbol of our fascination with the unexplained.
And that fascination is something to be cherished. It reminds us that there's still so much we don't know, so much left to discover.
It's a reminder to stay curious, keep asking questions, and never stop exploring the boundaries of what we believe is possible.
And on that note, we come to the end of our deep dive into the world of Mothman.
But the conversation doesn't have to end here. We encourage you to keep exploring, look into the sources we've discussed, and form your own opinions about this enduring mystery.
And who knows, maybe you'll even have your own encounter with the creature that haunts the shadows of our collective imagination.
Until next time, keep diving deep.